At 3:17 a.m., a house appears in the forest. If it says your name, don't answer. It's already chosen you. The village had a strange way of pretending nothing was wrong. During the day, it looked like any other forgotten rural place. Dusty roads, quiet fields, old houses leaning into time. Children played near the wells. Elders sat beneath trees, and the forest at the edge of the land seemed harmless, almost peaceful. But when the sun began to sink, something changed. Doors closed earlier than necessary. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Eyes avoided the direction of the trees. No one ever said why. They didn't have to. Everyone knew about the path. It was a narrow trail cutting straight through the forest, saving nearly an hour of travel. In daylight, people used it without fear. But after sunset, it became something else. A boundary, a test, a mistake waiting to happen. People who walked that path at night either vanished or returned wrong. The young man didn't believe any of it. His name was Daniel, 22 years old, raised in a city where darkness meant nothing more than broken streetlights. He had come to the village to stay temporarily, helping a distant relative manage some land. He listened politely when the locals warned him. He nodded when they spoke in lowered voices. But inside he smiled. Fear, he believed, was inherited, passed down through stories until it felt real. That night, Daniel stayed longer than planned in the neighboring town. When he finally checked the time, it was already past midnight. The longer road would take him nearly 2 hours. The forest path would take 20 minutes. He hesitated only once. The moon was high. The air was still. Nothing looked dangerous. So he stepped onto the path. At first, everything felt normal. Leaves crunched beneath his feet. The smell of damp earth filled the air. Crickets chirped in the distance. He walked faster, eager to reach home and sleep. Then, gradually, the sound began to fade. One by one, the crickets fell silent. The wind stopped moving the branches. Even his footsteps began to sound dull, as if the ground itself was swallowing the noise. Daniel slowed down. The air felt thicker, heavier, pressing against his chest. He checked his phone. No signal. The time read 3:16 a.m. A strange pressure crawled up his spine. That was when he noticed the light. Deep between the trees, something faint glowed, warm, yellow, steady. It didn't flicker like a torch or sway like fire. It stayed still, patient. He frowned. There had never been a house here. He was sure of it. He had walked this path before during the day. There was nothing but trees. As he moved closer, the shape became clearer. A house. Old, narrow, standing alone where no structure should exist. Its windows were dark except for one soft light inside. The wood looked aged, almost breathing, as if the walls expanded and contracted with slow, careful breaths. The front door was open. Daniel stopped walking. His instincts screamed at him to turn around, but curiosity whispered louder. Someone must live here, he reasoned. Maybe a forest caretaker. Maybe an old hermit. Then he heard it. His name, not shouted, not whispered, spoken gently. Daniel. His heart slammed against his ribs. The voice came from inside the house. It sounded familiar, too familiar, like someone who knew exactly how to say his name. He took a step back. Daniel, you're late. His throat went dry. That voice belonged to his mother. She had died 3 years ago. His legs trembled, but his mind refused to accept what his ears were hearing. Grief does strange things, he told himself. The forest was playing tricks on him. Exhaustion. Stress. The light inside the house brightened slightly. Come inside, the voice said. You shouldn't be out there at this hour. A memory flashed in his mind, standing in a doorway as a child, being called home after dark. The warmth. The safety. Without realizing it, Daniel stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the air changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold that seeped into his bones. The door slammed shut behind him with a final, echoing thud. Darkness swallowed the forest. Inside, the house smelled of dust and something older, like forgotten rooms and sealed secrets. The walls were narrow, closing in slightly, as if adjusting to his presence. He turned toward the door. There was no handle. Panic rushed through him. He pulled, pounded, shouted, though it didn't move. Then the lights flickered on. The hallway stretched far longer than the house should allow. Doors lined both sides, each one slightly different. Some looked new. Others were cracked, stained, rotting. A soft sound echoed behind him. Footsteps. He spun around. No one was there, but one of the doors slowly creaked open. Inside was a room he recognized instantly. His childhood bedroom. The same cracked ceiling. The same faded posters. The same bed. Impossible. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him. The room felt wrong, too still, too quiet. His reflection in the mirror looked tired, pale, older than it should. On the bed lay a notebook. His notebook. The one he used years ago, filled with thoughts he never shared. It was open. Pages turned by themselves, stopping at a sentence written in his own handwriting. I didn't help him. I could have, but I didn't. Daniel staggered back. Another door opened across the room. Another memory waited. The house was not showing him ghosts. It was showing him himself. And somewhere deep within the walls, something listened, pleased. Outside, in the village, a dog began to howl. At exactly 3:17 a.m., and from the edge of the forest, a voice drifted through the trees, soft, familiar, calling a name that no longer belonged to the night. The house did not give Daniel time to breathe. The moment he turned away from the notebook, the room began to change. The walls pulsed once like a living thing stretching its muscles, and the childhood bedroom dissolved into something narrower, longer. The bed sank into the floor. The posters peeled away, revealing bare wood beneath, carved with names. Hundreds of them, layered over each other, scratched deep enough to bleed sap. Daniel backed into the hallway. It was no longer straight. The floor bent slightly downward, as if guiding him somewhere he hadn't chosen. The doors along the walls were closer now, their surfaces marked with fingerprints pressed so hard they had dented the wood from the inside. He tried to run. The hallway shortened with every step. Panic set in. His breath came fast and shallow. He pressed his palms against the walls, and they felt warm, uncomfortably warm, like skin under a fever. A voice spoke from behind him. Not his mother's this time. You remember this one. He turned slowly. A man stood a few steps away, his shape blurred at the edges, like an unfinished photograph. His face was familiar but distorted, stretched thin by exhaustion and something deeper, shame. Daniel recognized him instantly. It was the farmer who had gone missing last winter. The villagers said he never came back. The man's mouth moved, but his voice sounded distant, as though it traveled through water. I only needed the money. Just once. The hallway door behind him opened. Inside was a field, frozen in time. A younger version of the man stood there, watching as his neighbor's crops were destroyed. Watching. Doing nothing. The neighbor begged. The younger man turned away. The scene repeated over and over. I didn't touch anything, the figure said. I just let it happen. The man's face began to blur further, losing definition, as if the house were slowly erasing him. Daniel stepped back. What is this place? He whispered. The walls answered him. You already know. Another door opened. This time, Daniel didn't want to look. But the house didn't allow refusal. He was pulled inside the next room without being touched. It was a narrow kitchen, dimly lit, the air heavy with the smell of burned food. A woman sat at a table, her back to him. Her shoulders shook slightly. When she turned, her eyes were hollow pits. I heard him crying, she said calmly. I just didn't open the door. The scene shifted. A storm. A child pounding from outside. The woman inside, frozen by fear, convincing herself someone else would help. Daniel felt something tighten around his chest. One by one, the rooms opened. Each room showed a different person. Different lives. Different excuses. I was afraid. I was tired. It wasn't my problem. I didn't think it would matter. The house wasn't punishing monsters. It was collecting ordinary people. Between the rooms, Daniel began to notice something worse. Reflections. In the glass of picture frames, in dark corners, in polished wood. He saw himself standing there, watching, not trapped, observing, judging. A door slammed shut behind him, cutting off the last of the other voices. He stood alone in a large, empty room. At its center was a mirror tall and cracked down the middle. Written across it in deep, carved letters were 3 words. What did you ignore? The mirror shimmered. Daniel saw a memory he had buried so deep he had almost convinced himself it never happened. A night. Zen. A phone vibrating on a table. A friend's name on the screen. He had been tired, angry, busy. He silenced the call. The next morning, the police came. The guilt he had carried for years finally found shape. The reflection leaned closer than he did. You heard him. The reflection said, "You chose sleep." Daniel fell to his knees. "I didn't know," he whispered. The reflection smiled. "No one ever does." The house creaked, satisfied. Somewhere above him, something heavy shifted, like a giant turning in its sleep. The mirror shattered. Darkness rushed in, thick and absolute. When the lights returned, Daniel was no longer alone. Figures stood around him, dozens of them, their faces incomplete, their bodies fading in and out of existence. They watched him silently. One step forward. "You don't belong here yet," it said. Hope surged through Daniel. "Then let me go," he begged. The figure tilted its head. "That's not how this works." The floor beneath them opened, revealing a staircase descending into blackness. "To leave," the figure continued, "you must replace." Daniel's heart sank. Replace who? The figures parted. At the bottom of the stairs, faint and distant, a voice drifted upward. A voice calling out from the forest. Lost. Afraid. Human. The house inhaled. And Daniel understood. Outside, the village slept, unaware that somewhere deep in the woods, a door was opening again. And this time, the invitation wasn't meant for him. The voice below the stairs didn't scream. It didn't beg. That was what made it unbearable. It called out softly, confused, as if unsure whether it deserved an answer. The sound echoed through the hollow depths of the house, wrapping around Daniel's chest and tightening with every word. "Hello? Is someone there?" The figures around him remained still. Their unfinished faces reflected no emotion. They had seen this moment too many times. Daniel stepped closer to the edge of the staircase. The darkness below seemed thicker than shadow, swallowing sound before it could reach the bottom. Each step downward felt like it led further away from time itself. "I can't," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I won't do this." The house responded with silence. Not refusal. Expectation. The walls shifted subtly, reminding him that waiting was not an act of mercy here. It was a test of how long his resistance would last. The voice called again. "I think I'm lost." Daniel closed his eyes. He remembered the path, the confidence, the way he had laughed at the villagers' fear. He remembered the door, open and patient, as if it had known he would come. He had not been dragged inside. He had walked in. That was the truth the house wanted him to understand. The figure stepped back, clearing the space beside him. One placed a hand over his heart, not touching, yet crushing. "You already chose once," it said. "This is only the echo." The staircase began to change. The darkness pulled itself upward, forming images, memories not his own. A young woman taking the forest path to get home early. An old man following a lantern light that shouldn't exist. A boy running from something unseen, crying out for help. All of them had her voice. All of them had trusted it. All of them had been replaced. Daniel's knees weakened. The house did not force him to move. It didn't need to. The door behind him slowly opened, revealing the hallway he had entered from. Beyond it lay the forest path, faintly visible, bathed in moonlight. Freedom stood only a few steps away. "You may leave," the house whispered. Hope surged through him, sharp, desperate. "But someone must take your place." The voice from below reached up again. "Please." Daniel turned toward the exit. For a moment, he considered running. The house waited. It always did. He took a step forward, then stopped. The reflection in the cracked mirror beside the door shifted. It showed him walking away, older, hollow, living a long life haunted by every night at 3:17 a.m. It showed him flinching at forest paths, at open doors, at his own name spoken too softly. It showed him becoming something worse than trapped. It showed him becoming the house's favorite kind of visitor. Daniel turned back. The staircase deepened. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the voice below, to himself, to the version of him that had believed some choices didn't matter. He stepped aside. The figures nodded, not in approval, but in recognition. The house exhaled. Footsteps echoed upward. A young man emerged from the darkness, eyes wide, shaking, alive. He ran past Daniel without looking back, bursting through the open door and into the forest, sobbing with relief. The door closed. The lock turned. Daniel felt it then, not chains, not pain, but absence. Something essential was being taken. The figures began to fade, one by one, their purpose fulfilled. "You may stay," the house whispered gently, and Daniel understood the final cruelty. He wasn't being punished. He was being preserved. Morning came to the village. People whispered about a man who stumbled out of the forest at dawn, pale but breathing. They asked him where he had been. He couldn't answer. They didn't notice the other figures standing just beyond the trees. Daniel watched silently. Days passed. Weeks. The house remained unseen by daylight, but Daniel felt its presence behind his eyes, inside his chest. He no longer needed walls or doors. He was part of it. At night, when the air grew still and the forest held its breath, Daniel walked the path. He stood where the house would appear and waited. At exactly 3:17 a.m., he spoke. Not loudly, not threatening, just enough to be heard. He called out names. Sometimes strangers, sometimes people who were already running from something. And when they turned toward the voice, curious and tired and human, the house began to form behind him, slow, patient, inevitable. The door opened, and Daniel smiled, not because he wanted to, but because the house finally knew his name.